Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a truly devastating story about a family completely torn apart by a heartbreaking misunderstanding and a secret diary. We're going to explore a narrative that perfectly illustrates how the things we perceive as undeniable, absolute truths can sometimes be the most profound illusions. Can a cruel betrayal actually be a great sacrifice? It's a heavy question, right? But it's exactly where we need to start as we dive into the life of a wealthy CEO who genuinely believes her brother abandoned her, only to discover a completely shattering truth. It really forces us to re-examine everything we think we know about the people closest to us. Because how do you actually distinguish between a selfish act of abandonment and the ultimate act of love? Well, let's dive into this and find out. All right, Section 1, a cruel betrayal. Let's set the stage here by looking at two completely different worlds. First, we've got Vanessa. After 5 grueling years, she's managed to save her family's company, taken it public, and now she sits at the absolute top of the corporate food chain. She is respected, but cold. Then we have her younger brother, Nate. Publicly, Vanessa actually shames him as a greedy traitor. See, the story goes that when their company was crashing, an 18-year-old Nate supposedly demanded luxury items, slapped his sister, and abandoned her to go find some wealthy sugar mommy to support him. So, picture this. Vanessa's in the middle of a live interview when a reporter suddenly hands her Nate's missing diary, casually dropping the bombshell that her brother has actually been dead for 5 years. Her initial reaction? Total cold disbelief. She actually thinks it's just some manipulative stunt or a cheap plea for posthumous sympathy. So she tells the reporter to just go ahead and read it live on air. And that decision sets the stage for a shocking live-streamed revelation that's going to change her life forever. Moving on to Section 2, Pages of the Diary. And here is where everything flips. Nate didn't leave for money. Not at all. The diary reveals that right when the family business was collapsing, Nate was diagnosed with terminal, last-stage liver cancer. He knew his sister had already been hospitalized with stomach bleeding just from the sheer overwhelming stress of trying to save their company. He knew, without a doubt, that she would bankrupt herself and literally work herself to death trying to save him. So what did he do? He put on a cruel act, he played the villain, and he purposely pushed his sister away just to protect her. Look at how fast this spiraled into an absolute tragedy. To make his lie believable, Nate completely cut himself off from his family's wealth, triggering this incredibly rapid descent into utter poverty. He moved into this dingy slum that cost just $30 a night, and as the cancer progressed, the pain got so unbearable that he was forced to sell off his cherished childhood possessions just to afford the most basic painkillers. We're talking about a kid scavenging steamed buns from the garbage just to survive. Which brings us to Section 3, Final Days and Ever. Even in the absolute darkest of times, Nate manages to find a companion. He adopts this stray, injured little yellow puppy and names him Ever. Nate sees so much of himself in this broken animal, and he wants nothing more than to give this dog the long, happy life that he knows he isn't going to have. But there's a catch. The puppy desperately needs surgery, and the mounting vet bills force Nate to do the one thing he swore he wouldn't: unblock his phone and call the sister he had purposely pushed away. Now, I really want you to focus on these numbers, because the tragic irony here is just gut-wrenching. Nate desperately needed just $2,000 for Ever's life-saving surgery. He calls Vanessa, but he physically can't bring himself to explain the truth. Well, Vanessa is enraged. She thinks he's just begging for cash after abandoning her, so she screams at him, transfers $20,000 into his account, and then permanently blocks his number. Think about that. He suddenly had the money to save the dog, but he had entirely, permanently lost his sister. So what happens next? Completely alone, blocked, and physically deteriorating, Nate uses just a tiny, tiny fraction of that massive transfer to buy a $20 chocolate cake. He celebrates his 18th birthday totally alone, in a park with Ever, just wishing for his sister's future success and happiness. And then, heartbreakingly, shortly after that, Ever slips his leash, runs out into the street, and is tragically killed by a car. Let's get into Section 4, the bitter truth. The live stream ends, but the nightmare is really just beginning for Vanessa. Her assistant hands her an investigation file filled with these cold, clinical police facts. It confirms everything. The diary wasn't some elaborate stunt. Her brother is truly gone. Because she had disowned him and ignored all the routine police notices, his body went totally unclaimed. In one final, desperate act to make sure he wasn't a burden, Nate had taken sleeping pills by a river near their parents' graves. His remains were eventually just ecologically disposed of by the city. These details, they just hit Vanessa like a freight train, all at once. She suddenly remembers seeing a frail, unrecognizable boy outside her psychiatric clinic years ago. It was Nate. He was secretly checking on her, and she had literally walked right past him. She also learns he died clutching the very teddy bear their mother gave him, and that before he ended his life, he had carefully buried his puppy Ever near their parents. The realization that he suffered through a terminal illness entirely alone, solely to protect her, it just plunges Vanessa into a deep, alcohol-fueled depression. This leads us to Section 5, the journey of atonement. So, how do you even begin to survive that kind of guilt? For Vanessa, it starts with a vivid dream where Nate actually asks her to live happily for his sake. That's the spark. She pulls herself out of the despair and decides to transform her immense wealth into the Nate and Ever Foundation. She systematically starts funding end-of-life care for teen cancer patients and setting up shelters for stray animals, doing everything in her power to ensure absolutely no one else has to suffer the solitary agony that her brother went through. Part of Vanessa trying to make things right meant tracking down the very few people who had actually shown Nate some kindness in his final months. She ends up meeting Sister Summer, a homeless woman who had tried her best to help Nate in the slums. Through Summer, Vanessa learns just how desperately Nate wanted her to live a happy, burden-free life. And get this, Summer actually refuses any financial reward. Instead, she chooses to volunteer at the foundation, which really shows Vanessa the profound, lingering impact of her brother's gentle spirit. And finally, Section 6, Peace and Farewell. Decades pass by. Eventually, that exact same reporter who first read the diary on air hands Vanessa an envelope that was found with Nate's belongings. Inside is this colored drawing Nate made in his final days. It depicts their family completely reunited, and yes, it includes Ever the puppy. On the back, written in fading ink, are the words, "Sis, I'm sorry." It wasn't a message of resentment at all. It was just pure, unadulterated love. And it's this drawing that finally truly allows Vanessa to forgive herself and live a full, meaningful life in his honor. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought. We've just seen how an ultimate act of love can perfectly masquerade as a profound betrayal. It's a stark reminder of the heavy, heavy weight of familial love, the utterly devastating cost of our assumptions, and how the words we speak in a moment of anger can echo long, long after the people we love are gone. Thank you so much for joining me to unpack this incredible story.